Today, we're diving into one of the biggest shifts in music production since stereo, Dolby Atmos. My guests, mastering legend Alan Douches and Atmos mixing engineer David Stingle, break down what Atmos really is, why it's already in billions of ears, even if listeners don't realize it, and how it can make your music more immersive, more discoverable, and even more profitable. Whether you're in a metal band or running a label, this episode is your roadmap to future-proofing your music. Alan, David, I appreciate...
I'm Alan.
Yes.
I'm David.
Appreciate you both, doing this with me, doing an episode on the show. I'm getting to do it from West Side Music, so it's always special when you get to do these kind of things in person. And we're going to be talking about all things Dolby Atmos, which is exciting. So I think, the best way to start off is, what is Dolby Atmos?
Let's just think about it as being an immersive format. I think it's really about how it's a new file format that plays back on a multitude of formats, stereo, iPhones, iPads. There's a giant misconception that you need this gigantic Atmos system to make it work on. But it's really a multi-channel format. The one file can work in so many different environments. So it's a lot easier from a distribution standpoint to upload that one file. And whether you're listening on earbuds or your iPhone or your iPad, or it doesn't even have to be an iDevice, right? I mean, it can be any device. It can be an Android, speakers, soundbar, 5.1 system, whatever it is, that same file internally will replicate what is best for that environment.
Yeah, I always like to try to sum it up quickly and just say it's surround sound that will also work in your headphones. So it's the same one file format, like you said, just will work in full set of speakers, but primarily it's designed so that if you put something in the rear or behind or above you or whatever, it's going to translate in headphones and do some processing to that audio to make it sound like it's actually coming from behind you or above you in just your headphones.
Who do you all find is listening to Dolby Atmos?
Everyone, for the most part. I mean, if you have Apple Music, Amazon, Tidal, YouTube Music, just about everything other than Spotify.
And there's a couple of new surround sound or Atmos playback sites specifically. There are a couple streaming services that are coming out that are brand new, that are only servicing Atmos. So, you've got a certain amount of an audience there that you can look into grabbing.
If there's an Atmos mix that you upload onto any of those streaming platforms, everything except for Spotify, the listener will automatically hear that Atmos mix as long as they're listening in headphones or surround sound system or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the trick here, is that, like, who's listening on Atmos? Billions of people, but maybe they don't even realize it.
Yep.
And so that's what happens a lot is you ask people about, do I need Atmos? And it's just like, well, there are a lot of people doing Atmos, folks. Maybe you should consider it. Admittedly, there were a lot of rough Atmos mixes when it first started happening. I think everybody that got into it, we've been doing it for several years, and then we've been doing 5.1 for decades now even, but it took a while to get into the groove of what works and translates the most across all the different variety of playback systems.
So kind of feeding off that, does someone need anything specifically to listen back to the Atmos? Is it a specific setup you need to have, or?
Nope. Period.
Okay.
Atmos, the really amazing thing about Atmos is that it truly just works on every single speaker platform. The way that it works, it has nothing to do with channels going to speakers. We're mixing in 714 here, meaning there's 12 speakers, so we have 12 physical lines that run to each speaker. Atmos, when you're mixing, it's not thinking that way. It's thinking, okay, you want something to sound like it's in front of you, but to the left and a little bit closer to you, and it's like here with a little bit of height, like there's the position of it. And it says, okay, you want it to sound like it's there. And then it says, what are you listening on? Oh, you're listening on headphones? Okay, we're gonna, do this little EQ trick here, a little bit of phasing, and then we're gonna make it sound like it's there. Or if it says, oh, you're listening in a full set of speaker system. Okay, we're gonna play a little bit out of these sets of speakers, and then it's gonna sound like it's there. Or if you're just listening on your phone, it'll just play the stereo fold down of it. So it just takes all of your audio that you've got all this beautiful panning information on it, and it just puts it into a regular stereo file.
But that's part of the mastering process and also the mixing process. It's very mix, like a lot of people have been calling mix adjacent. It's, the Atmos, although it's not actually always mixing as much as it's creating the Atmos master, there is a lot of information that's got to be done right
in order to
translate.
Yeah, in order to make it actually do that properly, I'm making it sound easy. It's very, very difficult. But when you do it right and when you figured out all the nuances to it, That's the amazing thing about the Atmos file, is that an Atmos mix will sound, great on your phone, Bluetooth to a little tiny speaker, or a full-on movie theater. That one same file, that one mix, if you do it right, will translate.
And it's kind of like a stereo mastering situation, right? You don't just master a stereo album so that it sounds good on one set of speakers, right? It's got to sound good in mono, stereo, big speakers, small speakers, earbuds, etc. So when you say what are people listening to this on? You've got to cover all the bases still, And there are some systems that when you play it back on a $70,000, surround, Atmos system, it's going to be cool. But it still translates to stereo. I think so many people now are recognizing, now that we're getting, and I say we as an industry too, now that we're getting it right, the Atmos binaural or spatial binaural, or even Eclipsa or any of the other newer codecs that are coming out, if it's played back in a binaural mode, it actually sounds better than the stereo. A lot of people are now getting that sensation that the headphone experience from the Atmos mix, Atmos master, is more engaging than the stereo. And that was hard. That was hard at first. There were a lot of people that were like, no, man, my stereo mix rules. That's what it is, because we were learning how to deal with it.
Yeah. You mentioned binaural and Eclipsa and all that. And just to define what those are. When we say, it's something that works in headphones and it's doing that positioning information to make it sound like it's behind you when you're listening in headphones, that's what we're saying. That's what binaural is it's the full surround sound mix translated into a way that sounds like it's surround sound, but in your headphones. That's what the binaural is. And then Eclipsa is like Samsung's version of that, which is very similar to the traditional Dolby Atmos version. And then Apple has spatial audio, which is also very, very similar to the Dolby Atmos version. If you didn't know they were different formats, you probably wouldn't notice the difference in any of them.
Right. Beyond the audio benefits and how it can create this more enjoyable listening experience and more immersive experience, are there any other reasons why bands or artists should consider doing their music in Atmos?
Yeah, playlisting, especially on Apple Tidal, places that are playing this back. Spotify's been pressured to try to do that. We'll see. But even these custom sites, they're going to start showing up. A lot of people were very reluctant at first to jump into this format, engineers, producers, even labels. And now we're getting label heads calling us and saying, okay, listen, I can't do everything in Atmos, but we're definitely going to start digging into our catalog and start, converting it over. So, I think that says a lot that they're having belief systems in it now. And that was tough at first.
I always kind of liken it to, shocker, I'm not 80 years old, so I wasn't around when mono was going to stereo.
What are you saying there, buddy? I'm not 80 years old.
But
man gets dissed.
I liken it to what I imagine that was like, where it's like there's been so much time spent perfecting how to mix in stereo that now that you're adding in, all of these different translation formats and all the different surround sound, people are scared. And for the first few years of people really trying to do it, a lot of people were getting it very wrong. And there's a lot of, not great sounding Atmos out there. I remember just a year ago, we were talking to some people in the industry and we were like, what do you think about Atmos? And there's a good few of them that were like, fad, whatever, it'll be gone. No point. I'm not spending any of my brain power thinking about it at all. And then a year later, we asked them, what do you think about Atmos? Just about every single one of those people are like, oh, I love it. It's awesome. It does this. And I really want to get this band in Atmos. We're just still figuring out the process and maybe seeing what the budget is for that. And but it's growing very fast. And pretty much every day there's naysayers that are turning into
and let's
believers.
drive the point home. Playlisting, folks. It's an affordable way to separate you from just, the average person loading up songs and or AI or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like it can really pull you quite a few steps up. Apple's been very clear about it. You want to get into their editorial playlists, give me an Atmos mix. And we've seen it. We've seen it happen with multiple albums, full albums showing up on editorial playlists on Apple because they've had the Atmos versions.
And Apple has a whole section on Apple Music of just spatial music. There's a whole section of Apple Music that is just dedicated to spatial music. And I've been in that section and I've discovered multiple artists just from going through their playlists. And it's such a, I think you quoted it earlier saying that there's 200 of the top, 200 top.
Billboard top 100, 98%. are all also available in Atmos.
Yeah, and all the major labels are doing Atmos right now because they know that if they do Atmos, they're going to get better playlisting. So it's a no-brainer for them.
Yeah.
And the amount of indie music that is getting put out in Atmos is a lot less. And so if you have your song coming out in Atmos as an indie artist, you're going to get lumped in with the playlisting with a lot of those bigger labels.
And the other thing is too that the people that are creating and editing these playlists that are going through the music, and they're listening on nice systems and they're listening to Atmos. So if there's any kind of ear candy or something that has a jump that says, I really kind of like this, we all know you've got to get any advantage you can on your production to get it to sound like, oh, this is cool, this is different, I got something, I'm noticing it. I have a friend, and our guy was just saying that even some of the Spotify editors are just listening in to the Apple playlists, the spatial playlists, because they know they're going to be getting pushes.
Yeah, there's that whole marketing, publicity side where it's like you're going to get better playlisting on Apple Music, and you get more, I don't think we even mentioned, you get more royalties on Atmos mixes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you get 10% more.
Now, 10% more.
From Apple. So you get 10% more.
At least at the moment.
Yeah.
And there are more places for it to be played, too.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's Atmos only or, the streaming sites now that are just popping, and they're just starting to pop up.
And
we wanted to do our own.
We did. Yeah. And for sync, too, for sync licensing with films are loving if you have an Atmos mix because...
Especially your instrumentals, too.
Because it just, oh, cool. Well, all films are in surround sound anyway, so now they can just drop your Atmos mix in. They don't got to redo a whole bunch of stuff. But there's that whole marketing and promotional side of it all. And then there's the musical side of why do you do Atmos? Like I said it earlier, and I'll say it again, I haven't done an Atmos mix where I've liked the stereo version better. I've liked all of the Atmos mixes better because there's just so much more you can do. You can still do all the same things you can do in stereo, but then you can also have things with different positional information. There's more space to fill things out. So if you've got a really dense mix, you can make it even denser because there's more space to fill. Or you can spread it out. If it feels too dense in stereo and you're having a hard time hearing everything, you can spread everything out a little bit more and it gives you more clarity. And then not to mention too, that it's more dynamic. There's more headroom. You're listening to something and you're like, wow, this is pumping. This is as loud as it possibly can be. This is incredible. And then all of a sudden it gets even louder and you're like, whoa, I didn't even know that it could go that far. And then all of a sudden, now there's things going behind you and now there's things above you and you're like, oh my gosh.
And all that translates, we got to remember this. This is what people forget, is that all that still translates to an iPhone. Yeah. Or a pad, the tablet.
When I'm talking about all this, I'm thinking of the headphone experience.
Yeah, the headphone experience, yeah.
And it's like I remember I was demoing an Atmos mix I did for this band, and there's this one section of the song where it just gets big and loud and crazy. And I'm looking at their faces while they're all listening to it. And they're all listening in headphones, by the way. None of them have ever heard any of this in full speakers. Their only experience is headphones. And all of their faces are like, whoa, this is just incredible. And then they were like, okay, that was insane. Was that just the mix or was that Atmos? Like, can we hear the stereo version of it? So I just flipped it over and let them hear the stereo fold down of it, which sounds, tone-wise and volume-wise near identical, but it just doesn't have that headroom and the space that I was talking about. And they all were just listening to it and they're all like, it's good, but it doesn't have that same wow factor about it.
So if a band or an artist is interested now, you've kind of laid it all out there for why to do Atmos. How do they go about doing that? Like both from a recording standpoint, what should be in the back of their minds, a mixing standpoint, but to do this properly, how do they have to go about it?
Let me just say that we're still learning. We've seen some first albums coming out recently that were recorded with Atmos in mind. And that's extravagant. But again, you're gonna get a market. The first person that comes out with something, it's gonna get ears. It's gonna get somebody listening in on it. So that alone is gonna make people excited about it.
When I'm tracking with a band, I record just for example, I'll record all my harmonies in quad. I'll record 4 layers of all of them. It doesn't really take much more time, but it's just, now I've got 4 layers of the harmonies. Most of the time in stereo, I'll mute half of those because you don't need your harmonies to be that dense all the time. And then when I start going into the Atmos world, I might add some of those back in. So that's kind of like when you're recording, maybe throw an extra room mic up with your drums. Maybe maybe track an extra synth part and it's way down quiet in your stereo mix, but just think, oh yeah, but when we go to Atmos and there's more space, this can fill up that more space. And that's kind of on the recording end of it. And then for mixing, in terms of like, if you're a band that's sitting there like, okay, wow, I want to do Atmos. This sounds awesome. I've already recorded everything though. So like, what do I do now? The procedure that we've kind of developed over here is that just getting us stems of your song. So bouncing out, like your kick snare and then all your drums and then your bass, and then maybe split your rhythm guitars into 2 parts if there's enough guitars, and go down the line. And then we'll mix the Atmos from the stems. And it's not like a full remix, but there is a little bit of mixing involved in terms of once you start moving things around.
But it includes the basics of their arrangement.
Yeah, exactly.
Their flow, because that's the thing that we know, and the mixing can take so much time, right? You can set up a mix pretty quickly, and then you can finish it pretty quick. But there's all that debating over in the middle, like, no, I don't know, that's not, I don't want that guitar that loud or whatever. By exporting stems, and that's what you're doing here with by the way, we're mixing in Atmos right now with Daniel.
Yep.
So, it's kind of like it allows you to concentrate on just getting to the point. But there's a lot that people can do to prepare ahead of time to make this process easier.
The stereo mix that you're sending is it's the representation of what you want that song to sound like. So we're trying to stay true to that. So that's why getting stems that sound as close to your finished mix as possible. That's step one. And then that way we don't have to be changing tones to try to match it to the stereo mix or anything like that. We can just say, okay, there's your drum sound. Now we just take that drum sound and we fit it into the Atmos format and the spacing the way that we normally like it.
Talk to us, any one of us.
That too.
Daniel too. You got enough experience now with this, and he's teaming up with us on a lot of this stuff. We have a big history with just stereo mastering, and as we're trying to take that same philosophy of working with DIY bands, working with independent artists. It's about helping you get into this format, getting it into a place where people we know are going to hear it.
Talking all about this, obviously we could tell it's an involved process. It takes time to do it right. But with that, what's the added expense if you're just looking at going from a mix to now wanting to go to Dolby Atmos? What should bands be thinking about when it comes to?
Well, that's why you're here. That's why we're here. That's the whole point of this, is that this can cost exorbitant amounts of money. And the guys that were doing the big records early on, they charged a lot of money, I guess.
Quote I think when Apple first was really starting to push it a few years ago, they were like, don't worry, guys, it should only cost you $1,000 per song.
Yeah.
And everyone that's not, Taylor Swift was like, I don't have $1,000. I've got a 12-song album. I don't have the price of a used Prius to mix my album in Atmos. And we saw that, and we were like, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. It needs to be.
Well, we were on that panel one time, and we were like 7 people on the panel, and everybody's prices were higher than ours.
Yeah,
but we were the one doing all the Atmos mixes.
Yeah.
So, that's why, I've been working with Daniel for years now, but it's just like our ethic is really supporting the independent artists, the artists that don't have a lot of money. Yeah. And we get that, but it does take a lot of time, So, the safest answer always is like, well, talk to us. And you can find our rates posted around and stuff, but it also depends on how complex you want to get it. If you just want to fit the format so that Apple doesn't kick it back, because you can't just add an Atmos reverb to your stereo mix, send it to Apple. They'll reject it. So it's got to be separated. There's got to be something for them to say, okay, yes, this is an authentic, Atmos approved, spatial audio approved.
Yeah, there's the stages of it, and it kind of has to do with how many stems, how good are the stems that you're bouncing? Because if you send us stems that sound nothing like your stereo mix, then we have to do a lot of matching and remixing on it, basically, which we don't want to do.
But matching is a good word, because that's often where we're starting.
Yeah, it's
we
usually
like to start with trying to match what's already done, so we're not really having to rethink that.
I will say, though, staying true to the feel and the intent of the stereo mix, that's what we mean by match. And then just trying to take that and make it a little more immersive, maybe a little more dynamic, maybe a little more exciting.
I should mention, we have 2 full Atmos rooms. This is David's room, and Daniel's been doing prep. David's been doing prep. Then we have a full-on mastering room, mastering suite with Atmos as well. So.
Yeah.
Where do both of you see the future of Dolby Atmos going? What does the future hold?
I think that one day, maybe 5-10 years from now, not tomorrow, but one day it's going to be like what do I need a stereo mix for? I don't.
Well, that's happening
you know.
already in some. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
it's like, I guess, sure, we could use a stereo mix for specific, vinyl and cassette, merch items and stuff like that. But all the streaming platforms are in Atmos. Everyone's, there's Atmos built into all the new cars coming out.
It's future proofing.
It's future proofing, yeah.
It's a word we
and
like
that's where I see the future of Atmos, is that eventually it's just, you record your song. When you're recording your song, maybe a lot of the work is just done in stereo speakers. Maybe you're recording in it in a system like this room that has a surround sound system in this tracking room. But then when you go to do your mix, which is the way I'm doing a lot of my mixing now, is as I'm mixing, I'll get, the majority of my mix together in stereo, and then I'll transition over to an Atmos format. And after I've got all my tones and the band's happy with kind of the balances of everything, and then we'll kind of finalize the mix in Atmos. So we're finalizing the Atmos mix and the stereo mix at the same time.
Anything else we should touch on with Atmos? I know we could go down crazy rabbit holes, but anything to kind of cap things off for?
Well, I think, like you said, to further a little on David's thoughts on that, and the question of like, where do we see it going or something, it's just like, the labels are fully behind this, and not that I'm not here to either bash or compliment the majors for going there. It's just happening. So in a sense, there's going to start to be this transition, and if it was cost prohibitive, I could understand why people would be hesitant about doing this, but it's not. Either you're talking to the wrong people, or you're not doing your homework and you're not checking in on this. It is such an incredible format that can play back in any environment, that it should be the way it should. Even when we're mastering for stuff now, for vinyl, for cassette, for CD, for streaming, whatever, we can export 4 or 5 different. Boy, it would be great if in the metadata for that stereo version, it would know where it's going and it would reassign whatever volume and limitations, whatever we're doing. It doesn't do that, but Atmos does. Atmos has got all this additional metadata that goes on that allows it to expand when you have that system, or contract and say, nope, let's keep it tight.
Yeah.
I appreciate you both taking the time to, kind of get some more information out there. The more people can be informed, the better. Yeah. So I appreciate you taking the time.
And it's not just bands. I got to say, we talk to labels all the time. Like we just had that one with Mint 400.
Yep.
That they're just like, all right, listen, you guys got to tell me about this, because I'm seeing it. They just did their first release we did for them, and clearly it's working for him. He's seeing the result, and it's just an indie label, but it's like they're seeing the result of it. So
there's a lot of information out there about Atmos, and there's also a lot of not great sounding Atmos mixes out there. On the contrary, there's a lot of really good sounding Atmos mixes out there too. We've always worked with smaller artists. Our goal is to kind of take all of that crazy amount of information and just say, don't worry, we've got all that craziness. Let's just focus on the music of it. Let's do this at a budget that you can afford, and let's just take your song and hopefully make it sound even better and get you more placement and help you with more discovery.
Future-proof.
Future-proof. That's a good way to end it. Future-proof.
Awesome.
We're gonna dive back into this.
Go,
mix.
guys. I'll come back in here in a few minutes.